Candles trembled in their silver holders, throwing shadows across the banquet hall. Violins screeched, then faltered. A goblet slipped from a nobleman's trembling hand, striking the marble floor with a crack. Red wine bled outward like a wound. Chorus of coughs turned to choking. Jewels clattered as guests clawed at their throats. The smell of roasted lamb mingled with something bitter, metallic, wrong. One man's chair toppled, another collapsed face first into the cake. No one saw the cook standing in the shadows. No one heard the lullaby beneath the screams. The feast had just begun. The sun sat heavy over the island, pressing its weight down on cane fields that stretched to the horizon. Smoke rose from boiling houses where sugar turned thick as tar. The air reeked of molasses and sweat. Chains clinked with every shuffle. Of bare feet, inside the governor's mansion, the heat pressed harder still, though chandeliers burned bright with imported candles, and marble floors gleamed like water. A voice cut through the stifling quiet of the service halls. "Count it." "Again," Elias Gray muttered, his thin fingers sliding across a ledger. His nails were yellow, bitten down, ink-stained. He licked one fingertip, smudged a number, and tapped the table with a coin as if marking time. The steward's face was pale against the heat, but his eyes were black stones, cold and unmoved. Behind him, bent over a tub, Marta wrung out a sheet. With a grunt, the laundress's hands were raw, her knuckles scarred white. She paused long enough to glance toward Elias, smirk curling at the edge of her mouth. "You'll count till your bones turn to dust," she said, her voice sharp as a needle. "But no coin will keep the curses from this house." Elias did not look up. "Superstition," he murmured. "The governor's wealth is iron, Marta, solid, unbreakable." Marta leaned close, whispering over the wet cloth. "Iron rusts in salt air, and blood-stains silk no matter how fine." For a moment the only sound was the drip of water, the shuffle of servants moving past with baskets of bread and bottles of rum. Elias flicked his coin, caught it, set it down with a click. "The wedding will silence every whisper. A daughter bound to wealth, a family bound to power, all debts forgiven." Marta let out a laugh that had no joy in it, or debts remembered. "You've seen it, Elias. The eyes that follow you in the kitchens, the way the slaves hold back their tongues but not their stares." Elias turned finally, his gaze fixed, voice flat. "Eyes cannot harm me." "Eyes," Marta replied, "become hands, and hands—" She wrung the sheet hard, water splashing across the stone floor. "Become something worse when left too long in chains." A silence stretched between them. Outside, a whip cracked in the distance, a scream cut short by the steady roll of drums from the fields. Marta dipped her head back to her work, murmuring almost to herself. "A feast, this grand. It calls ghosts to the table." The steward closed his ledger with a snap. "Ghosts do not eat, the living do, and they will eat well." But as he walked away, the coin still tapping against his palm, Marta's words clung to the walls like smoke. The mansion shimmered in the heat, the kitchens filled with the smell of meat roasting, sugar caramelizing, rum spilling over the lips of casks. Beneath it all ran the bitter undertone of something festering, waiting. The wedding was 3 days away, and already the house felt cursed. The kitchen was the heart of the mansion. Fire roared in the hearth, iron pots hissed with steam, and smoke clung to the rafters like old ghosts. Amid the heat and chaos, a figure moved with quiet precision, a lullaby humming softly under her breath. Abina stirred a pot with a long wooden spoon, its handle worn smooth by years of her grip. The spoon was more than a tool. It was her relic, carved by her father before soldiers dragged her from her village. She never let it out of her sight. "Always singing," Marta teased one morning, passing by with a basket of linens. "Even in this hell." Abena only smiled faintly, the tune never breaking. It was not joy, it was memory. Her mother's voice lived in the melody, a shield against silence. The door banged open, boots on stone. Governor Henri Duval entered, gold pocket watch glinting against his waistcoat. He snapped it open, checked the time, though there was no need, then snapped it shut with a flick of arrogance. His voice carried like a whip. Why is the bread not risen? Why is the meat not carved? Must I remind you that kings eat from my table? This week, the servants froze. Abena kept stirring, her eyes lowered. Henry's gaze found her. "You, girl, do you even hear me?" She did not answer. Her spoon moved in steady circles. Henry strode forward, grabbed the ladle from the pot, and flung broth across the floor. Steam rose where it splattered. "When I speak, you look at me." Still, Abena said nothing. Only the lullaby, barely audible now, carried in the back of her throat. A sharp slap cracked across her cheek. The kitchen went silent but for the hiss of the fire. Henri leaned down, his voice almost intimate. "One day, silence will cost you your life." He turned and marched out, pocket watch snapping shut again. From the doorway, Eloise lingered. She was no more than 14 then, white, gloves pristine against the doorframe. Her face was pale, almost delicate, but her eyes followed her father with something between fear and pride. When Henri vanished down the hall, Eloise stepped inside. She approached Abena hesitantly. "You shouldn't anger him," she whispered. He means well in his way." Abena met the girl's eyes for the briefest moment, then returned to her spoon. Eloise fiddled with her gloves. "I wish he would speak to me as he does to you. He barely notices me." She hesitated, then added softly, "I envy you." Abena said nothing. Only the lullaby filled the space. The words swallowed, the melody thin and fragile. Years earlier, in Abena's memory, the lullaby had been fuller. The voice of her mother, singing under a wide African sky while her father carved wood by firelight. He pressed the finished spoon into her small hands. "So you will always feed life, never hunger," he said. Then came fire, shouting, chains. The spoon was the only thing she carried through the voyage. The lullaby was the only thing that survived intact. Henri's story unfolded differently. He had been a minor clerk once, desperate for power, clawing his way upward through bribery and cruelty. Whispers in the colony told of rivals ruined by forged debts, of overseers bribed, of merchants threatened until they bent to his will. Each step measured by the snap of his pocket watch, every moment of another man's fall marked like the striking of a bell. And when fortune came, Henri took it with both fists. The mansion rose on broken backs, his name carved in iron gates. He walked through halls that smelled of cane sugar and blood, and believed himself immortal. Eloise's childhood was softer, though twisted by her father's hand. She learned piano under chandeliers, French manners at his insistence, and how to smile without hearing. When slaves cried in the yard, she was told to close shutters. When Marta cursed under her breath, she was told to laugh at superstition. When she asked about chains, her father gave her gloves, pressed smooth and white. "Keep your hands clean," he told her, and she did. One night, Abena stumbled carrying a tray. A silver plate slipped, clattered to the floor. Silence fell. Henri's rage was immediate. He struck her with the back of his hand, sending the spoon skittering across the stones. Eloise gasped, rushing forward. "Papa, it was only an accident." Henri silenced her with a glare. "An accident? Do accidents feed kings? Do they win wars? Do they build empires?" He spat on the ground. "No! Discipline builds empires. Remember that, child." Abena crawled for her spoon, clutching it to her chest like a wound. From the corner, Marta whispered, "Every chain rattles once before it breaks." Henri ignored her. He checked his watch, snapped it shut, and left. That night, in the dim quarters behind the kitchen, Abena sat with the spoon in her lap. An older woman, skin creased with age, sat beside her, sorting herbs into bundles. "You must learn which heals," the woman said softly, "and which kills." Abena looked at the leaves. "Why?" "Because one day," the woman said, her voice a shadow of a smile, "you will need both." Abena hummed her lullaby, the spoon in one hand, the herb in the other. The seed of vengeance had been planted, and the house slept, unaware. The fields rolled in endless green, sharp cane swaying like knives. Under the weight of the sun, men bent, low, their backs scarred maps of pain. Among them was Samuel. Every scar on his skin had a story, and Abena knew each one. They had been children together once, laughing by a river before chains. Now he swung the machete in silence, sweat streaking down his chest. When night fell and guards loosened their hold, Samuel found Abena by the kitchens. She sat with her spoon across her knees, humming the lullaby. "You hum like you're somewhere else," he said, crouching low. His voice carried both warmth and fear. "I am," she whispered. "I see the river. I see the sky without chains." Samuel shook his head. "Dreams cut deeper than whips. Stop them before they stop you." Abena touched the spoon, her thumb, tracing the carved handle. "One day, Samuel, one day we'll leave. There must be more than this." He looked at her scars, then at his own. "Chains are heavier than hope." She smiled faintly, but her eyes did not. "Hope is the only thing that keeps me alive." Later, in the shadows of a storeroom, Madame Fournier beckoned her. The midwife was old, her body bent, but her hands strong. She smelled of smoke and dried herbs. Around her waist hung little bundles of leaves, roots, powders wrapped in cloth. "You listen when others do not," the woman said. "Come, I'll show you." She laid out the herbs, some bitter, some sweet, some smelling of earth after rain. "This root heals fevers," she said, pressing a sliver into Abena's palm. "This leaf brings sleep, and this powder—" She tapped a small pouch, her eyes narrowing. "This ends sleep forever." Abena held it carefully. "Why tell me this?" "Because silence can kill slower than poison," Madame Fournier answered, "and you are not meant to die silent." Days later, a strange moment unfolded. Eloise came into the kitchen, gloves, white as snow, carrying a ribbon of pale silk. She looked around, then walked straight to Abena. "I want you to have this," she said softly, pressing the ribbon into Abena's hand. "It will look pretty against your hair." Abena stared at her, uncomprehending. "Why?" Eloise hesitated, eyes darting toward the door. "Because you are kind to me. You listen." For the first time, Abena allowed a smile. She touched the ribbon to her cheek, and the lullaby rose, almost tender, but then Henri entered. The gold watch gleamed in his hand. "What's this?" His voice cracked like thunder. Eloise froze. Henri's eyes narrowed at the sight of the ribbon in Abena's hand. "Do not soil yourself with pity, child. Gloves on, ribbon back." Eloise's face turned red. She yanked the ribbon from Abena's grasp. The fabric snagged, tearing slightly before it disappeared into her father's pocket. Abena lowered her eyes, silent once more. The lullaby stopped mid-note. Henri checked his watch, snapped it shut, and walked away. Eloise lingered for a heartbeat. "I didn't mean," she whispered, then fled. The torn edge of ribbon burned in Abena's palm like fire. That night, Samuel found her again. "You're playing with fire," he warned. "Her kindness is a blade. It cuts both ways." Abena turned to him, eyes lit with something sharper than hope. "Her kindness is nothing, but her father's cruelty is everything. And one day, it will break." Samuel grasped her hand, calloused and trembling. "Do not drag me into your dreams. I want to live, Abena, even in chains." She hummed the lullaby, low and steady. "And I want to live free, even if it kills me." The night swallowed their words. Somewhere in the dark, a dog barked. Somewhere far away, a drumbeat echoed, steady as a heart. Abina's spoon lay across her lap, the old wood catching the moonlight. And beside her, Madame Fournier's herbs whispered of choices yet to come. The courtyard was blistering under the noonday sun. Dust clung to the air, the scent of cane and sweat heavy as a shroud. Samuel was dragged forward by two guards, his wrists bound, chains scraping the stones. His head hung low, breath ragged. A crust of stolen bread still lay crushed in the dirt where they had caught him. Henri Duval appeared on the balcony above, gold watch glinting, his shadow cutting across the yard. Elias Gray stood at his side, ledger in hand, expression cold as stone. Martha lingered by the laundry line, wringing fabric so hard her knuckles whitened, eyes fixed on the scene. Henri's voice rang out. "Caught with my bread. Bread meant for nobles. Bread meant for my table." Samuel tried to lift his head. "It was hunger, master, nothing more." Henri sneered. "Hunger? You were given rations." "Rations fit for dogs," Samuel rasped. The crowd of slaves shifted, murmurs rising like a dangerous wind. Henri snapped open his watch, glanced at it, then shut it with a click. "Mercy is for men. You are property." He gestured sharply. The whip cracked. Samuel's body jerked, a raw cry ripping from his throat. Blood welled in thin lines across his back. The whip fell again, and again. Abina stood among the servants, her hand clutched tight around her father's spoon. Her lips moved with a sound no one else heard, the lullaby, soft, steady, rising against the storm of screams. "Stop this," Martha hissed under, her breath unable to look away. Elias only tapped his coin against his palm, cold and detached. "Discipline," he murmured. "Necessary discipline." Abina's humming grew louder in her chest, though her voice never broke the air. Samuel collapsed to his knees, back torn and glistening with blood. The whip cracked once more, the sound ringing through the courtyard like a pistol shot. Henri raised a hand. The whipping ceased. Samuel lay shuddering, chains rattling with every breath. "Leave him," Henri said. "If he lives, he will remember. If he dies, he will serve as warning." He turned his gaze on the gathered slaves. "Let all remember, bread is dearer than life." The guards stepped back. Samuel sagged in the dust, blood soaking into the ground beneath him. Abena whispered, too soft for any to hear, "Then I will make you choke on your mercy." Her lullaby carried on, a fragile thread of defiance. Henri strode away, pocket watch snapping shut. Elias followed silent, ledger pressed tight to his chest. Martha dropped the cloth from her hands, the fabric falling into the dirt, soaking up Samuel's blood. She crossed herself quickly, lips muttering. "The house is cursed," she whispered. The courtyard emptied slowly. Samuel was left crumpled, his breath shallow. Abina knelt beside him, pressing the spoon into his trembling hand. "You'll live," she said quietly. He opened one eye, pained, afraid. "Not after this. You will live," she repeated, steady, the lullaby humming beneath her words. "And they will not." Chains rattled as Samuel shifted, but his voice broke. "Abina, do not." Her eyes burned. "The time will come." The sun lowered behind the mansion, shadows stretching long and thin. The dirt drank Samuel's blood until it turned dark. The air hung heavy with silence, broken only by the faint echo of a lullaby. The first cruelty had been struck. The vow had been made. The announcement spread like wildfire. Governor Henri Duval summoned his household to the courtyard, gold watch glittering in the sun. His voice boomed, self-satisfied. "In 3 weeks' time, my daughter Eloise will be wed to Etienne Marchand, heir of the merchant fleet, a union of land and sea, power and fortune. The island itself will bow to our name." The nobles cheered. The servants bowed. Chains rattled faintly as the slaves lowered their heads. Abena did not bow. She kept her eyes on the spoon in her hand, fingers tight around the worn wood. The wedding was the perfect stage. a feast so large that no one would see which dish carried death. Jonas darted into the kitchen later that day, a boy of 12 with hair tangled like rope. He carried a wooden horse, its paint chipped from years of play. He waved it like a banner. "A banner," he called. "I heard him. A wedding. Does that mean more food, cakes, sweet wine?" Abena gave him a small smile. "Yes, Jonas. More food than you can imagine." He grinned, dropping onto a stool. "Will you save me a piece?" Her hand brushed his hair. "I will save you something sweeter than cake." The boy laughed, rocking his toy horse across the table. He never saw the shadow that crossed her eyes. That night, Abena slipped into the storeroom. She closed the door, heart pounding. Madame Fournier's bundles of herbs lay hidden in a sack beneath sacks of flour. She ground leaves between stones, slow and steady, the sound scraping against silence. Bitter dust filled the air. Her lullaby rose under her breath, guiding her. "Hands!" The door creaked suddenly. She froze. A shadow crossed the floor. "Who's there?" Elias Gray's voice slid like oil into the room. Abena shoved the herbs into her apron, grinding stone clattering to the floor. She straightened, spoon in hand, pot nearby as though caught preparing a meal. Elias stepped inside, his coin tapping against his palm. He squinted at her. "At this hour, the kitchens sleep." "I cannot sleep," Abena said softly. "I stir broth to pass the time." Elias sniffed the air, suspicious. Then, with a shrug, he turned. "Do not waste coal for idleness. The governor counts every flame." The door shut. Abena exhaled, trembling. Her lullaby resumed, quiet, urgent. The following day, Isabel lingered by the kitchen doorway. She was Eloise's maid, her silver hairpin always glinting, her eyes softer than her mistress's. She watched Abena knead dough, hands firm, movements rhythmic. "You work harder than anyone," Isabel said. Abena did not look up. "Because I must. Eloise says you are her favorite. She says you make her feel less alone." Abena smirked faintly. "And yet she wears the ribbon I was forbidden to keep." Isabel's face flushed. That was not her choice. Her father, Abena's hands slammed the dough hard, cutting her words. "Her father rules her as he rules us all." Isabel lowered her voice. "If I could help you, I would. You must believe me." Jonas ran in, clutching his toy horse. "Abena's going to..." Her hand shot out, covering his mouth. "Going to what?" Isabel asked, curious. Abena forced a smile, releasing the boy. "Going to make the best feast this house has ever seen." Jonas giggled, nodding eagerly, his secret muffled in his throat. Isabel lingered, eyes narrowed, but said no more. 2 nights before the wedding, Father Mathieu arrived to bless the kitchens. He was a frail man, his rosary missing beads, his voice worn thin with doubt. "God walks where bread is broken," he murmured, sprinkling water across the counters. Abena bowed her head, hiding her expression. "Father," she whispered, "does God walk where chains rattle?" He froze, eyes on her child. "I pray he does, and if he does not..." Father Mathieu sighed, clutching his broken rosary. "Then men must learn mercy where heaven does not grant it." Abena's eyes burned, but she said nothing more. At last, the ritual. Abena locked herself in the pantry, only the flame of a candle lighting her face. She laid out the herbs, leaves, powders, roots on a cloth. The spoon rested beside them, gleaming in the faint light. Her hands moved with calm precision. She crushed, measured, mixed. The air thickened with bitterness, the scent sharp enough to sting the nose. The lullaby rose again, her mother's song woven with her own breath. She dipped the spoon, stirred the mixture into a dark liquid. The wood carried the memory of her father, the rhythm of his carving knife. It was no longer only a spoon, it was an heirloom of life. It was the vessel of death. The candle sputtered. Shadows leapt across the walls. Abena whispered to the silence, "For Samuel, for the river, for freedom." And the poison waited, sealed in silence, ready for the feast. The chandeliers burned brighter than the sun, 1,000 crystals scattering light across the governor's mansion. Musicians tuned their violins. The bowstrings creaked like whispers. Before a storm, silk rustled as ladies swept into the banquet hall, their perfumes clashing with roasted lamb, sugared fruits, and spiced rum. Laughter swelled, filling the air thick as smoke. At the center of it all, Governor Henri Duval raised his hand. His gold pocket watch glimmered against his vest, catching the firelight. "Tonight," he declared, "my daughter joins with the Marchand dynasty. Wealth and power forever bound, no colony shall rival ours." The crowd erupted in cheers. Goblets clinked. Eloise sat beside him, white gloves spotless against the crimson tablecloth. Her laughter chimed like glass, innocent and sharp at once. And, from the shadows of the kitchen door, Abena stepped forward, spoon in hand, platter balanced upon her shoulder. She moved like smoke, unseen, but everywhere. The first dishes landed on the long oak tables. Roasted lamb dripping with honey glaze, bowls of sugared almonds, pies filled with figs and cinnamon. Guests reached eagerly, hands jeweled and greedy. Abena watched from the edge of the hall. She hummed her lullaby softly, almost drowned by violins. Henri lifted his goblet. "Taste, my friends, taste the triumph of Duval blood." Silver forks scraped plates, jewels sparkled, rum flowed. Eloise leaned close to her father, smiling. "Papa, even God himself envies this feast." Abena's eyes lingered on the girl, the ribbon long ago stolen, the gloves that stayed clean. While the island bled, the first cough broke the music. A merchant dropped his fork, clutching his throat. His wife leaned toward him, then gasped, hands trembling. Another man rose, stumbling backward, goblet slipping from his grasp. Red wine spilled across the marble, dark as blood. The violins faltered, coughs multiplied, swelling into choking fits. Guests clutched their throats, eyes bulging. Jewels scattered as necklaces snapped, rings clawed against the table for purchase. Eloise's laughter died. Her gloved hand froze around her fork. Henri's face turned crimson. He coughed, gasped, tried to speak. "What is this?" Abena stepped forward, calm as the eye of a storm. Her voice carried through the chaos. "I fed you what you gave us. Bitterness." Screams erupted, chairs toppled, plates crashed against the marble, scattering shards across the floor. A nobleman fell face first into the wedding cake, cream smearing across his lips as he choked. Another collapsed onto the harpist's strings, the final notes screeching in dissonance. Henri staggered, clutching the edge of the table. His gold watch slipped from his vest, clattering to the floor. He turned toward Abena, spittle shining on his lips. "What have you done?" Her lullaby rose louder, steady, defiant. "I gave you what you taught us," she said. "Chains made liquid, whips turned into wine." Then came the cry that tore through her resolve. "Abena," she turned. Jonas stood at the far end of the table, his wooden horse clutched in one hand, a half-eaten tart in the other, his lips already pale, his small chest heaving. "No," she whispered, the lullaby breaking. She ran to him, catching him before he collapsed. The boy's eyes fluttered. "You said sweeter than cake." Her spoon fell from her hand, clattering against the floor. "Forgive me," she begged, rocking him against her chest. "Forgive me, little one." Jonas's toy horse slid from his grasp, landing beside the governor's watch. Two symbols, side by side, innocence and tyranny, both claimed by poison. Guards surged into the hall, swords drawn. "There!" one shouted. "The cook!" They lunged toward her, boots pounding, steel flashing, but Abena did not run. She laid Jonas gently on the floor, closing his eyes with trembling hands. Then she rose, straight-backed, facing the chaos she had birthed. Her lullaby rose again, unbroken, filling the hall louder than the screams. The guards circled, hesitating. She did not flinch. Henri staggered toward her, face purple, veins bulging. "Witch!" he gasped. "Demon!" She met his gaze, her voice steady. "Slave, daughter, memory, fire." He collapsed at her feet, gold watch lying shattered beside him. His final breath rattled, then stilled. Eloise screamed, falling to her knees beside her father. Her white gloves pressed into the bloodied marble, stained at last. Her voice cracked, "Papa! Papa!" But his eyes were glass. Abena's gaze fell on the girl. Innocence had fled her. What remained was hollow silence. The feast had become a tomb. The hall erupted in pandemonium. Guests staggered, foaming at the mouth. Servants wailed. Marta the laundress clutched the doorway, whispering prayers under her breath. Elias Gray backed away, coin tapping furiously in his hand, eyes darting for escape. Abena stood unmoved, lullaby. Steady, spoon abandoned, her father's carving turned into a weapon of legend. Guards advanced, but still, she did not run. And in that moment, time fractured. Henri dead. Eloise's innocence shattered. Jonas gone, sacrificed to vengeance not meant for him. Abena herself, no longer slave, no longer daughter, but something else, something whispered, something eternal. The chains rattled in silence. The fire burned unseen, and the lullaby lingered above the screams, weaving her into legend. The morning after the feast, the mansion reeked of death. Perfume could not mask the stench of vomit, sweat, and spilled wine. Flies swarmed the remains of the cake. The chandeliers still burned, but their brilliance felt obscene in the quarters of the surviving nobles. Mourning was not quiet, but furious. Lady Marchand tore at her veil, her voice hoarse. "My son lies in the ground, poisoned by a kitchen slave. I demand her flesh torn apart. Do you hear me? Torn apart." Others echoed her rage. The governor's allies wept not for the dead, but for their investments lost, alliances broken. Eloise sat apart, staring at her gloved hands. They were stiff with dried blood, stained forever. She would not remove them. She would not eat. She would not speak, except to whisper over and over, "Papa, I'll be good now. I'll be good." Her innocence had not only shattered, it curdled into madness. The colonial court convened within days. A spectacle, not justice. Abena was dragged into the hall, chains binding her wrists and ankles, each movement echoing like iron thunder. Her face bore no fear, her eyes no plea. Elias Gray stood tall at the witness bench, his voice cold as coin. "She was always too quiet," he said. "Always humming, always watching. I told the governor once, but he dismissed it. He should have listened." He tapped a coin against the wood, once, twice, like a death toll. The judge, powdered wig trembling, slammed his gavel. "You, Abena, stand accused of mass murder, of treason against the crown, of witchcraft against God himself. What say you?" Abena lifted her head. The court leaned forward, hungry for words. She did not speak. Instead, her lips parted in song. The lullaby rose, soft but unbroken, the same melody that had carried her from childhood, from chains, from fire to poison. The judge roared, "Answer! Confess!" But her song drowned his demand. Samuel, hidden among the crowd, felt tears burn his cheeks. His scars itched with the memory of whips, yet his chest swelled with awe. She was no longer just Abena. She was defiance itself. In the quarters, whispers spread like smoke. "Did you hear?" Marta asked, her tongue sharp as always. "They say she killed 10 nobles with a single spoon, that she sang while they died." Some crossed themselves in fear. She was a witch. Others shook their heads. No, she was a mother to us all. Children begged Marta for the story again, eyes wide, hearts pounding. She told it each night, adding details, sharpening the legend. She did not beg, Marta said. She did not run. She burned, and her song burned with her. And the slaves carried that memory like a hidden blade, the square filled with bodies, nobles in silks, merchants in coats, slaves dragged to witness. The air smelled of pitch and ash. Abena was tied to the stake, chains wound tight, the sun glaring down. Her spoon was gone, confiscated, but Samuel had stolen it, hidden deep in the earth where no oppressor would ever find it. Father Mathieu stood nearby, his rosary dangling, beads missing, voice weak. "Repent, child. Let God save your soul." She looked at him calm. "If your God wished to save me, he would have broken these chains long ago." The crowd roared for fire. The torch touched the wood. Flames crackled, crawling up her legs, licking at her dress. Still she sang. Smoke filled the square. The lullaby grew ragged, but endured. Chains glowed red, branding her wrists until flesh charred. Eloise stood in the front row, her gloves pressed to her mouth, tears streaking her powdered face. "Papa," she whispered. "She killed Papa." The nobles cheered as the fire consumed. The slaves bowed their heads, some in grief, others in silent triumph. Samuel clutched the hidden spoon in his pocket, pressing it hard against his palm, until it cut his skin. At last, her song broke into silence. Her body was ash, but her memory remained unburned. The victims carried bitterness, demanding blood, clutching wealth tighter. The oppressors staged their trial, burying truth under ritual and power. The community whispered in chains, turning a woman into fire, into song, into legend. Abena was gone, yet her lullaby lingered, in whispers, in dreams, in every rattle of the chains. Time passed, but the fire of that night never died. It smoldered in whispers, in songs, in fear and in hope. Among the nobles the tale became warning. They called it the curse of the cook. Children of the wealthy were told, "Obey your father, or Abena will come in the night. She will stir poison into your milk, sing her song as you choke." Mothers whispered it at bedside, their voices sharp with terror. Yet in the quarters, her name carried light. The enslaved told their children, she sang when the chains burned. She fed them their cruelty. She made lords tremble. The lullaby became a secret anthem, hummed in fields, hidden beneath the crack of whips. Eloise grew older, brittle as glass. She still wore her gloves, yellowed with age, the stains still faintly visible. Servants heard her in the night, whispering to shadows in the hall. "Papa, are you there?" She wandered the ruined banquet chamber, her voice trembling. "Abena, leave me be. I gave you kindness once. Why do you haunt me?" Her eyes were hollow. Some said she never married. Some said she did, but drove her husband mad with her midnight ramblings. To the end of her days, she swore the lullaby followed her, soft, relentless, in every creak of the house. Stories twisted. The poisoned feast grew larger in the telling. Some claimed 100 nobles died. Others swore the wine itself turned to blood. A few whispered the chandeliers rained fire as she sang. The tale gained a name, the Red Wedding of the Colonies. To oppressors, it was a cautionary legend, told with a shudder. The moment power trembled, the night a kitchen slave nearly unmade an empire. To the enslaved, it was scripture. Rebels carried her song into the hills. When patrols passed, they hummed it low, daring discovery. When secret meetings gathered, the melody opened the circle. The spoon Samuel buried became relic in memory, though none ever saw it again. She fed them bitterness, they said. One day we shall feed the world the same. Generations blurred her face, reshaped her hands. Some painted her as demon, hair wild, eyes burning red. Others carved her as saint, haloed in fire, spoon glowing like a torch. Priests thundered sermons warning of her sin. Midwives whispered her remedies to cure fever, to ease childbirth. Her memory lived in contradiction. Witch to the masters, mother to the broken, fire to the fearful. Even centuries later, the story refused to die. Historians unearthed records, trial transcripts, nobles' letters, fragments of martyrs' gossip preserved in parish notes. Yet facts blurred under myth. In one scholar's words, what began as vengeance became legend, and legends are harder to kill than flesh. Oppression does not vanish into silence. It grows there like roots under stone, waiting for a crack. Chains do not only bind bodies, they ferment bitterness, drop by drop until the vessel overflows. Abena's vengeance was not born in one night, nor in one poisoned spoon. It was born in every lash across Samuel's back, in every ribbon stolen, in every coin Elias tapped, in every laugh Eloise offered at another's hunger. It was born in silence, and silence can be sharper than screams. Poison is paradox. It heals when measured, kills when bent to rage. It is knowledge turned into blade. It is the whisper that says, enough. When Abena stirred her mother's lullaby into her deadly broth, she revealed a truth the governor had long denied, that power is not eternal, that those beneath the table can still decide what fills the cup. But the question lingers, bitter as the taste she left in their throats. Who truly carried the poison? Was it Abena, mixing herbs by candlelight, spoon heavy with memory? Or was it Henri, who poured chains into men's veins, who built his empire on hunger, who laughed at mercy? Perhaps the poison was never in the broth. Perhaps it was always in the system that forced her to brew it. Abena's lullaby did not end with her. It seeps into history, a melody of defiance. It does not ask for pity. It does not ask for fear. It asks only this: when chains rattle, when fire burns, when silence hums louder than screams, what will you do if you were in Abena's place, chained, beaten, silenced? Would you forgive? Would you bow your head, whisper prayers, and wait for mercy that never comes? Or would you burn it all down? History leaves no easy answers. It leaves ashes and questions that smolder still. Her lullaby asks not for sympathy, but for reflection. How many poisons are brewed in silence today? How many chains rattle in the dark, waiting for someone to sing? We tell ourselves the past is finished. But the past is never finished. It lingers in song, in story, in legend. And legends, they demand to be heard. If stories like this move you, if dark truths, hidden histories, and voices that refuse to be silent speak to you, then stay with us. Subscribe. Share this story. Keep the fire alive. Because Abena's song is not the last. More tales wait in the shadows, tales of vengeance and mercy, of cruelty and defiance. The question is not whether they will be told. The question is, will you listen?